Okay, whenever you're ready.
So, good evening, everyone. I'm Zapp from XOR, and before I get started, how awesome are these toy makers badges for CypherCon? A lot of work goes into these. I was digging into it today, into the terminal. The fact that they have a MUD with a computer inside there, and then programming language is just amazing. So I'm going to talk about tonight how I went from zero to vendor in 12 months. I knew nothing about hardware, nothing about embedded. I only love badges, and so I decided to make one for myself. I run the XOR Twitter account. I also go under the name Zapp, so that's my Twitter handle there at the bottom. So let's get started. If I can change slides, maybe not. There we go. So just before we get started, this has nothing to do with my employer. So if anyone here is from my work, this has nothing to do with you. These are all my own views. So what is XOR? We get this question a lot. It's really nothing. It started out as 3 of us, computer science, EE, math majors. We started off at DEF CON 18, created the account, walking through the halls of DEF CON 20. And the purpose was, let's go troll DEF CON. So there were all these parties at DEF CON 20. Ninjas had their party. There was an LOL Bitcoin party, I believe. And everyone was just going crazy over these things. We're like, well, let's go make a fake party and then get people to chase us around for it. So we did that, posted some fake tweets. We got people to chase us over to HHV. Had some fun. So if anyone was trolled by that, I apologize. But that's how we started. The correct pronunciation is and not XOR. That's another question we get a lot. It was just kind of created on the whim, so I apologize. We're up to 5 members now. We know each other from high school and college. So we have Jorge, we have Andrew, myself, Zapp, and the 2 new members are Hiron and Bitstream. So what do we do? Other than trolling DEF CON, we like to make stuff. So DEF CON 21, we had our Ninja phones we got from 20. We were able to social our way into getting those phones. And we made a Bluetooth breathalyzer. And that was nothing more than an app. You dial pound beer on the phone, and you get a breathalyzer. You blow into it, and if you didn't have anything to drink that night, it would show milk graphic. If you had a couple drinks, it'd show Heineken. If you had a whole bunch, it was maybe vodka or 151 was the highest you could score. We never registered that on anybody, sadly. DEF CON 22, we didn't do any projects. Not all of us could make that DEF CON. It was unfortunate. Came back at DEF CON 23, and we made a hackable Wi-Fi backpack. And so this was a Raspberry Pi with a battery pack running 64-bit web, and it was Hack Me for Beer. Turns out no one wants to hack that. They think it's a honeypot. We had beer, and we could hack us. So we did get social engineered for one. They bugged us about it, so here's a beer. So that was kind of disappointing. The tweet there on the right, if you go way back in our Twitter timeline, that's about where it starts. We deleted all the trolling stuff. But that was a screenshot of the web page you got when you logged into the backpack. And there's a simple login page, and if you reverse engineer it, you got a rolling code that lined up with our watch. So if you gave us that code, you got a beer. No one did it. DEF CON 24 is where the group really took off. I think we had 100 Twitter followers at 23, and by 24 we were over 1,000. It grew exponentially. And then for 25, we're actually coming up with a Vendor 2.0. I'm going to show you a demo here at the end of that, what I've got so far. One thing we do is we do drink beer. We prefer craft beer, and we homebrew. And we prefer to do it while we make stuff. So it's usually a combination of the two. Good decisions or bad. We just kind of end up with what we end up with. Oops, all the way back to the end. Sorry about that. It's only 194 slides. There we go. So who am I? Other than calling myself Zapp, I've been coding my whole life. I learned BASIC at 8. Taught myself C at 10. And that I'm not some super C programmer, but it was basically hello world, those types of things. But this is what I've been doing. This is what I enjoy. My bachelor's is, of course, in computer science. I got a master's in 2010 in systems engineering. Most of my professional career has been spent middle tier, doing SOAP web services, Java, Oracle, PHP, SQL, XML, XSLT. It's not my fault. That's what we did. Those were the technologies at the time. It was painful because you're worrying about how many gigabytes of RAM do I get in my Java virtual machine so it doesn't crash. And now I'm worried about how many kilobytes of RAM do I have left in my microcontroller. So it's vastly different worlds. 5 years ago, I was promoted to engineering management. So now I go to work, I go to meetings, I use Office, and I travel. That's my life. So I balance it out with doing these kind of projects. So at work, it's political. It's interesting. I enjoy it. Don't get me wrong. But at home, I get to go and get my hands dirty and twiddle bits and those sorts of things. Until the DEF CON 24 badge, hardware was always magic. It just kind of worked. I didn't understand why. I didn't pay a lot of attention to my double E classes in college because I liked the coding more, but I got through, I passed, I graduated, whatever. So that's me. I'm also obsessed with electronic badges. Obsessed. So that's why I made my own, and I'll get to that in a second. My first experience was at DEF CON 18. I was actually late showing up to DEF CON that year. I got lucky because they had a second wave of badges. I didn't know how lucky I was. A lot of people had paper badges, but I got one. Really enjoyed it. One of the things about the badge was it's single layer aluminum and this nice e-paper display. Joe Grand did this design. I still have it in my workbench. I need to fix it though. But that was kind of where things got started for me. DEF CON 20, I mentioned the Ninja badge, so we were able to social our way into getting a couple of these. It wasn't really a badge, it was a phone, but they had these custom HTC 1V phones with their own kind of scan on top of Android. When we hacked it to add in things like Rickroll and all sorts of other fun things, Flappy Bird and whatever, it was all done through the dialer. So you just dial up whatever app you wanted, you could dial up a launcher. We didn't want to touch any of this, so it looked stock out of the front, just like we got it the first day. Jorge, who I introduced at the beginning, he did the Crypto and Privacy Village badge 23. When I saw him do this, I was like, if he can do it, maybe I can do this too. These things sold like hotcakes. I helped sell them, helped do some of the debugging, some of the handing out the badges to folks. So this was one of the things that really inspired me. The same DEF CON, there's a DEF CON shoe badge. I'm not really into guns, but it was a badge, so I bought it, and he was selling it. DEF CON 503, this is a group out of Portland. Joe Fix made this one, also went home with that one from DEF CON 23. They had those LEDs on the back side, just like your CypherCon badge does. Layer 1, so this was actually where we brought one of our prototype vendors last year, but the Layer 1 badge, another nice one in my collection. This was a PSOC 4 or 5 with 20 different LEDs like we have on our badge. QueerCon. So I don't know if any of you saw this last year at DEF CON, but these were amazing. I traded 2 vendors to get one. The traces on are just amazing. The LEDs look amazing. They have 2.4 gigahertz RF. The QueerCon guys do a really good job on their badges. Not quite as obsessed as Corgo. This is a picture of him from his own Twitter account right around DEF CON. He's got everything on there. I don't know how he got it all. If any of you were looking for vendors and you couldn't find one, it's his fault. He's got 3. He's got a prototype vendor, and that's my fault. I traded that to him. He's got one of the black vendors and one of the white vendors. So if you want one, he's got 3, just so you know. Okay, so I love badges. How hard can they really be? I wanted to make my own. So the thing is, come up with a great idea. Let's create a design. Of course, we need to put vendor. Just go make a whole bunch, and then we'll profit, right? How hard? It's not that bad. Problem is, this is everything I knew about hardware on one slide. Seriously, I didn't know how to solder. I didn't know one thing about embedded microcontroller, but debuggers, anything. And that was at DEF CON 23. So how I got there in 194 steps. Step 1, learn the basics. So a week after DEF CON, went home, got on Amazon Prime, get the Arduino little starter kit you can get. It has all the LEDs and the buttons and everything like that. Soon I was going through all the different projects. I had 15 different projects in there, and displaying the temperature. It was great. How hard could this be? Eventually, I migrated off to getting some 555 timers off of eBay. Threw together one of those circuits, had the LEDs blinking. My wife thought I was crazy, but it was cool. The next step was to learn to solder. So if I was going to make a badge, I needed to do something that was surface mount. So here is kind of the pinnacle of where I was trying to get to. I actually soldered on one of our 48-pin TQFP chips onto a breakout board, put that on a breadboard, dropped in all the capacitors and crystal, and actually was able to code it. This particular picture, there is an issue with it. If you've done any of this type of work, there is no crystal. I spent 2 days trying to figure out why I couldn't flash this thing, because there was no crystal. Detailed, right? Once I kind of got that nailed down, I kind of understood how to solder. I created a project for myself. Bender was still too far away. It wasn't something I could accomplish yet. So I decided, why don't I make a Christmas ornament for some family, friends, and coworkers. So I came up with this. It's kind of a bell, and it had LEDs around the ring. It played some Christmas music. Really simple. Sent the design out to China. Waited 4 weeks for it to show up, and it actually worked. So friends enjoyed it, and that was kind of one of my first designs. Also, up here I have the 555 timer. I took off that breadboard and threw it into a PCB just to see it. Can I do this? All my footprints were wrong. Sorry. Okay, so step 4, brainstorm. So this is where the group, we kind of got together and said, well, what should we make this do? Hackers like bling, so let's put a lot of bling on it. And more bling and more bling and more bling. It's got to be hackable. We decided to go with Arduino for this guy, so that folks could plug it in and make sure that it was, so they could plug it in and program and do whatever they wanted. We had a couple of folks do that. We had somebody at the spectrum analyzer at one point. We wanted the badge to talk to other badges. We wanted people to chat. We wanted to be able to troll each other. We wanted to do all these interesting things. We wanted Easter eggs. The best badges, like the CypherCon ones, they have all sorts of Easter eggs buried within. And not everyone will find it, and there may be Easter eggs that will never be found. So that's some of the stuff we want to do. We want to have games, and we love Bender. And no one was really doing Futurama themes, so that's what we put in there. We had some kind of outlandish ideas. We thought about, let's do password cracking, let's do spectrum analyzer, why don't we make it a breathalyzer, FPGA, because why not put an FPGA? Who knows what for? Let's just throw one on there. And then TV begun. So we kind of threw those ideas out. We kind of went through and said, well, what parts would this require? And then how realistic or what's the cost to do that? Step 5 was to take those ideas and start to prototype them. So this was really just gathering a bunch of different parts, coming up with the different drivers and figuring out, well, can we actually do this? Does this particular Nokia display you see in the top right, can we animate this thing fast enough? How does it look when we show some sort of falling matrix display on it? Turns out it doesn't look good at all. We threw that one away. We ended up switching to this OLED display you see at the bottom. Created some specialized breakout boards so we can test the radio, we can test the LEDs, we can do those types of things. Threw it on a breadboard, and as you notice, our design's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. We threw it on a breadboard and tested out and started writing some of our code. This was about Christmas time last year that we did this. And of course we failed. So still not very good at soldering. I'm better now than I was, but I had issues with the shorting on these radios. So it's like, well, if they're going to short while they're underneath the sock, why don't you just raise the sock off the chip or off the PCB? It's all good. So that's how I fixed it. When we did the actual badges, we did surface mount them, and it was much cleaner. So step 7 is set up the bomb. So this was going through all the prototyping and figuring out down to the nth degree every single part we're going to put on the badge. Everything from we're going to need 4 of these resistors, and there's 125 badges. How many do we need to buy? Who sells it? At what cost? Etc. And we could know within just a few pennies whether or not something would save us money or not. And this spreadsheet was really a lifesaver throughout the process. So the spreadsheet behind it is how we mapped all the pins and made sure we didn't have any resource contention between everything. This is how I like to manage projects, so apply it here. So once we kind of had our BOM set up and we knew what we wanted, we put it all in one place. So I took just a simple board, soldered everything together, put some alligator clips on it, wore it around my neck, wore it around the house. My wife was really excited about that one. She didn't have any idea what I was doing. But everything was in one spot. And I use this to do a lot of coding of the sleep and a lot of the LED animations, etc. This is just kind of proving that, yeah, all these components work together at the same time. So the next thing was, okay, take all that off the breadboard, put it into a PCB. We decided to do 4-layer because why not do 4-layer? We're doing some RF. So we got the display, we got our 5 buttons, we got our 8 LEDs. Almost everything's represented what we wanted. This is where we add in the NAND flash and USB. We didn't have that before. So that was our first real prototype. Problem here, there's a lot of fails here too. So the USB was backwards. The display, we mixed some pins on the display. Our crystal footprint was wrong. Our diode footprints were wrong. Our SMA port did not fit the SMA adapter we had. And that 5-way button that was really nice and saved a lot of space was terrible. Couldn't use it. I have big thumbs. I couldn't use it. The little black pieces actually came off and broke. I had to replace it on several of the prototypes. So it was a really good learning experience here. We iterated upon that. The next thing I did is I threw that all away and came up with a new schematic. This is the schematic you'll see on our GitHub if you were to go and pull it. This is actually the final design. We did start from scratch, make sure everything is the way we want it, make sure all the components are in the way we want it. Step 12 was to actually spin that into a PCB. So this was our very first, called it Bender 1. It was white and black, just like the regular human benders were at DEF CON. You'll also notice it looks very different than the bender you saw at DEF CON. So the display was down at the bottom. It has a through-hole crystal. And the primary way of programming was over serial, which was really painful. And it also had a lot of fails. So we realized that there's an internal pull-up on the reset button or on the reset pin. And so when we removed the external pull-up that we had on it, we were basically just shorting it to ground. So if you press the button, it shorted the badge and reset the badge. The problem was we couldn't get into DFU mode because of that. So that was an issue. USB was also screwed up still. We were missing some sort of resistor on there. Why would you ever put a display covering the mouth of the bender? I don't know. That was just a bad decision. That's like his signature part of his look. So once you kind of figured out what we had with Bender 1, next step was to buy parts, and a lot of parts. Every day, I'd come home from work and there'd be some box from China. I'm probably on some watch list now because of the number of shipments I've received. The top left, those are all the displays that came. I was really concerned about those because China tends to sell those in 4 different variants, and I wanted to make sure I got the exact same pin out. I didn't really care about the color. I cared that the pin order was the same. And they're all over the map of which ones they sell. Turns out they were all the same. That was good. Only a couple were failed. I bought a whole bunch of NAND flash and then a bunch of DigiKey and circuit orders as well. And even more parts. Radios. We have the bunch of batteries. I think we bought 800 batteries for this project, as well as a bunch of antennas, and then boxes and boxes of LEDs and various other components. So now we have the parts, and we understood what we learned with Bender 1. Step 15 is to really go back and come up with a new prototype. So this was, fixing that reset button, moving the display, those types of things. So here's Bender 2. If you find Corgo, he's got one of these. If you want to see it in person, I did bring one with me. It actually works. We were able to flash over USB if you run a resistor up to one of the I/O ports. I actually wore it at layer 1. It was great. But it also had some fails. Sorry, I get back. We did do Hypnotoad on that one. It was awesome on that. So, all hail Hypnotoad. So some fails here. So USB, as I mentioned, it was not recognized as a high-speed device by Linux or Windows. This was missing that resistor. The other thing I learned is this phenomenon called ground bounce. And as a computer science guy, this is a completely foreign concept to me. So behind the display, that's where we put the voltage regulator. It's a switching regulator. We had some massive current loops. And when you have massive current loops in a voltage regulator or switching regulator, you get alternating current on those loops. And that creates a massive electromagnetic field. On the back side of the display is the radio. So we're sending RF, or we're sending electromagnetic energy through our radio. That didn't exactly work very well for our transmit and receive. So the way we fixed that is in the final design, we moved it down. So there's your physics for the conference. So step 17 is to finalize the PCBs. What we did here is fix the issues with Bender 2, order just a few from China, make sure they work the way they should, before we put in the big order for the 300, I think, PCBs, what our final order was. Those are the red ones. They work just fine. Went in place in the rest of the order for the black and the white PCBs. Step 18 is production. How hard can it be? You just do this 175 times, right? So you take your stencil, you put down your solder paste, put it into an oven, which I have here. I have a reflow controller. And then your board comes out like magic. Perfect. And I love this picture. Every time I stop at the slide when I was reviewing this, I would just stop and stare. For some reason, it just looks so nice. But that's the basic production step. So that's the first Bender that came out. And that's actually when I'm flashing it here with all the graphics. We had a really bad way to flash the graphics onto the NAND flash. It was basically a serial protocol. You send one byte, and the badge responds with OK. You send another byte, OK. You don't know if the badge actually got the right byte. It just got a byte. And but that's all we could come up with in the time we had before DEF CON. And it worked to get all the badges flashed for the most part. So steps 19 to 193 is repeat that 174 more times. So I spent most of the first 2 weeks of July, before we had our big solder party with the whole group, just coming up with those PCBs at the top. And that was just 2 layers, just doing the reflow. I did maybe 150 of those in those 2 weeks. Kids go to bed, I go in the garage, and just solder. And then we had our solder party over a weekend, bigger solder. What could go wrong, and we came up with the final badges. And that was before debugging. So after our solder party, I was in the garage debugging and fixing badges. Yeah, it was fantastic. And we had a lot of failures. So the number one biggest failure were solder bridges. And this affected our SPI bus, our LEDs. We had shorts. The MCU at the top right that you see there, those are obvious. You can see those with the naked eye. You don't have to put it under a microscope. You can fix them right there. And that's usually, when they came out of the oven, that's usually how they look if there's an issue. The badges that had a problem did go all the way through flashing, and then we'd start to test them. And you'd get some weird behavior. It would be, you get some sort of screen corruption, or the radio wouldn't work. And you go look under a microscope, you get these, type of solder bridges here. The one on the right, not so bad. You can see that with the microscope. The one on the left, you have to have it just in the right light to see if there's a bridge there. So some of the design issues, and if I had to go back and do it again, which I wouldn't actually, I don't plan to do Bender 1 ever again, but if I had to, putting 3 devices on the same SPI bus is very hard. It's a bad idea. Don't do it. especially when you have a radio that's always receiving or sending packets. You have a display that you're animating, and you have a NAND flash you need to get data off of to put on the display. So I was having all sorts of resource contention issues. I used semaphores. It was just a royal pain. The other problem we had was drop packets. I couldn't pull packets off the buffer fast enough. The next time I came back around after some sort of screen draw or whatever. So we just dropped packets. So that's why sometimes chat didn't work, those types of things. We had corrupted memory. Anytime we wrote to flash, if the display had to do something, it would sometimes corrupt bytes. It was just a royal pain. RF traces are very, very hard. Just don't do it. If you're a first timer like me, don't even think about it. I did it. It was not a good idea. Most of our badges couldn't transmit. We're not really sure why. There was a 90-degree return on the RF trace that may have accounted for a lot of it. I haven't really gotten back to debug it much. They all could receive from a very short range. We did test during development. We could go about 300 yards. At the con, is maybe 30 feet. So largely, we had a plan for mass rickrolling that was not successful. I did make a special device that's battery powered that would just send the rickroll command every second. So we'd walk by groups of vendors and then just watch all their badges go into the rickroll mode. And then when they quit, it would say rickrolled by the NSA. So it worked well enough for that, but it wasn't what we had originally planned. So the DEF CON 25 badge, our original plan for CypherCon was, hey, this will be right in the middle of our Kickstarter campaign. If everything goes as scheduled, why don't we use CypherCon and then kind of give it a kick. That's no longer the plan. It sold out in 12 hours. Completely blew us away. Completely. We had no idea. We thought we'd be lucky to sell 60, let alone 112 hours. So just ignore that. So this is the badge. So you've probably seen us on Twitter. We've talked about Regado. The system on chip is the Regado BMD 300. This is the Nordic NRF52 ARM Cortex M4F chip. We were using an STM32, which was an M3 last year. This year, 512K of flash, 64K of RAM, so I can do a whole lot more with that than I could last year. We are using BLE 4.2, and we have an integrated antenna, so I don't have to deal with RF traces anymore. Regado did that for me. And an interesting story here, I just cold emailed their support desk and said, hey, can I get some samples? And within a couple hours, I get an email back from the CEO saying, hey, I'm in China. Let's hook this guy up. He copies his whole staff. He sent me 10 socks, and then said, oh, by the way, I'm a black badge holder from DEF CON. And so is the co-founder. So they hooked us up with some really good price on all these socks. So that's what we're using this year. It's kind of fortuitous that they're from DEF CON as well. We're using 128 by 128 1.4-inch color LCD. So that's double the pixels we had last year. At the time I came up with these slides, we were pushing about 19.5 frames per second. As of this week, I'm up to 23, so definitely faster. And that's over an 8 megahertz SPI bus. That's probably the part I'm most proud of right now. That's if you do the math on that, at 16-bit color, the bus is saturated 75% of the time when it's animated. And I've heard that if you can get about 50%, you're doing well. So I'm pretty proud of the driver I'm using here. It's all DMA. We've upped the number of LEDs, 87%, so even more bling. We're bringing in the tilt and the ambient light sensors from last year. Turns out a lot of people really like the tilt feature of the badge. You can use it upside down. It makes sense, because that's the way to wear it. The PCB is twice the size. Turns out that also means it's 4 times the cost. So that'll be interesting. Our battery life will be about 30% better. The measurements we have is we're about 30% down on the power consumption than what we were. We're about where we were in our best case last year before I had to revert some changes due to stability issues. But so far, everything's doing very well. We're also doubling the quantity, more than doubling the quantity this year. So there'll be more than twice as many on hand at DEF CON after the Kickstarter. So hopefully people who want it can get it. The design, you've probably seen this. This is our avatar. So it's a mix of Hunter S. Thompson, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and of course Bender. We went through a lot of different options, everything from Transformers to Pikachu, because Pokemon Go was so popular. I'm not really a big fan of the game, but whatever. We had a bunch of designs and said, well, why would we not do Bender? That's what everyone says, Bender badge. So we threw Bender in there with this Fear and Loathing design. And then here's a picture. So you guys are actually the first ones to see the red Bender. That's we call that one Man Bear Pig 3. Man Bear Pig is our code phrase for the project. That way, if anything leaked out before we're ready to say, it was just a phrase. So Man Bear Pig 2 is on the right, Man Bear Pig 3 is on the left. I actually had that one back in my hotel room. That fixes a lot of the hardware issues we had, some of the fails we had on the revision 2 badge. And you can see just how much bigger it is versus last year's. So some of the main features, I'm not going to give away everything, but we have a lot of bling. If you go through all the combinations of bling we have in there right now, it's over 400 or 500 different modes or possibilities. We hope to have just 100 just out of the box, but you'll be able to do some interesting things with it. We are going to have an interactive badge-to-badge game. I'm a little bit behind on coding that right now, but we have some big plans there. We ported Flappy and Ski Free from last year already, and they're in color. The critique I got on Ski Free was, hey, there's no snowman at the end. So I think we're going to probably put a Man Bear Pig in the end, just to keep it the theme. It's just time, right? If you've never heard Chip 8 or Super Chip 8, this is usually a beginner type of thing for emulator development. Never done emulators, and this whole project for me is about learning. So we have a Chip 8 and Super Chip 8 emulator. We have 2 of the 6 games, that's 64. Already in there, they're running quite nicely. Next. So we have a term, you're going to hear this, probably bring your own bling. The idea is we want you to be able to add your own bling modes to the badge and not, go spend 2 days in your hotel room or in hardware hacking or something doing this. We want you to do it within a couple hours from your laptop. So bring your favorite GIFs, make sure they're square, because the screen's square. We'll provide instructions, and you'll need very few tools to get this done. We want to see what you can come up with. We're also considering some add-ons. We'll probably publish some physical specs or something so you can do some 3D printing. We've had some folks ask for that. And some other big features we can't reveal yet, but we will. So how about that? Good. Yeah. So let's see if this works. So one of the biggest requests, I don't know if you can see it, was a switch. The way you turned it on last year was by removing or putting in the battery. So we've added that, real simple. Same 3 batteries as before. We do have some sponsors, so they'll make things possible. So this is our UI. Similar type of model you saw last year, just now we get to play with color. Is it reversed? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see if I can see the demo gods doing it. How's that? Yeah, now it's weird for me. All right, so bling. So this is one new mode deal from last year. Badger. My kids like that. So flames. It doesn't show up on the camera. If you look down at me, you can probably see the LEDs going. And that's it. This is running the 19 frames per second version. The other one is up to 23. So there's the dancing cry, or dance protest. Bender. Hypnotoad. You gotta see this one in person. It looks amazing. Not even. So those are the built-in modes. We're not showing the bring your own bling yet. We don't want to reveal all the way that it works yet. Some of the games. See if I can play this upside down. Probably not. Game over. Sorry. Yeah, you can't see it. You'll have to see it down here first. Ski free. Actually, I'll show you some of the chip games. This is one called Ants. It's a little platform game. That's wrong. So this is the chip 8 was I think it was a Sharp system. It's from the 70s. But it's kind of got an interesting following on the internet. People have ported it to HP calculators, all sorts of things, and we put it on a badge. It's pretty fun. It was a fun learning experience. With this. And then we have some other settings as well. So that's all I'm allowed to reveal today. We have others that I purposely removed from the code. But, afterwards, if I have some time, you're welcome to come down. I'm going to try. Just don't walk away with it. Only 50 more slides, I promise. No, just kidding. Some things I've learned. Soldering's not hard. Like I said, hardware seemed magical. Soldering also did seem really hard. It's really not. It just takes a little bit of practice. It takes a steady hand. Drivers are not too hard either. Last year, I didn't write any of my drivers. I did write one at the end once I was kind of confident in myself. I wrote the flash driver. This year, I've written all my drivers. So that's been a fun experience. I'm really proud of the display driver on this next year's badge because that's where I spent all my time. I put a Hackaday post up on hackaday.io that kind of explains, the way I was able to optimize it with DMA. So that's been a lot of fun. One thing, if you're thinking about making a badge or any sort of project like this, think about your end user. In our case, it's the drunk DEF CON hacker. Design for them. Make it reliable. Make sure you plan battery life so that if they leave it on at night or forget to flip the switch or forget to take out the battery, it'll still work on Sunday. They're not going to be able to plug in the USB very well. So think of your end user. One thing that we weren't as good last year, but we're working on this year is plan for failure. So prototype many times. We just got my wife just sent me a picture. We just got our 4th revision of the PCBs. So iterate through your design, have plenty of time in your schedule for that. Add flexibility to the design. So intend that you may change components. You may change a resistor here, capacitor there. Make sure there's some room in the design to do that. The other thing is buy spare parts. So on ours the display is pretty fragile. So we have about 50 spare ones coming, and we have an easy way to replace these. Last year's they were nearly impossible to replace, even with hot air. The other thing I've learned is hardware is not hard, especially with the right tools. I did all of Bender last year with no oscilloscope, no logic analyzer, which is interesting because now I don't know how I can do it without either one of those tools. So I have both of those in my workbench. Production is very easy to underestimate because you think you have a stable design. Let's just go make a bunch of these. That's hard. Your supply chain really needs to be managed. If you go back to the bill of materials slide I had, you have to know every single part, where you're getting it from, when are they showing up. China, we actually placed orders for our MCUs probably early May, so we had plenty of time. They didn't bother to ship it. They just didn't ship it. We came back a month later and said, well, where are these? And they didn't even reply to our emails or anything. So it put us into a panic mode. We're getting within a couple of weeks of when we need to do our production. We had no MCUs. So we ended up placing orders through 3 different sellers and then getting the parts piecemeal. We ended up making the con, but you have to understand where everything's coming from. So design for production. So figure out how are you actually going to put these together? How are you going to assemble them? What's the process going to be? And then work that into your design so that you're not creating too much extra work for yourself. Because if you don't, your rework and your debugging is going to take a lot of time. I can speak for that personally. We had probably a 40% failure rate on these badges. And it would be 3 or 4 hours per badge of my own time just getting it to work, whether it's a short spy bus issue, some sort of solder. RF, again, is very hard. I'm not Michael Osmond. He makes it look easy, but it's hard. And peer review, I can't stress that enough. Like, I can look at something for days and think it's okay, ship it off, and then it comes back with an error where a friend of mine could look at it for an hour. It would have been okay. It would have identified the issue. Again, be meticulous about your BOM. If you figure out your cost per badge based on the BOM, you're going to fail. If your cost is much greater than that, it's usually double or 3 times, just with all the prototyping and such. It's a very, very easy thing to miss. Software matters. I didn't touch a lot on software here because that's one of the things I'm better at than hardware. But start your coding early, work on your drivers early, iterate through it. Feel free to throw things away if they don't work. And the Arduino IDE sucks. Okay, I don't have to use it this year. I love it. I have Eclipse. I have GDB. It's great. If you look at our GitHub, you'll notice that our file names are very short. Arduino puts all of your files on tabs along the top, and if you overflow that, they put in a drop-down menu. It's a real pain if you have a file that starts with an S and you have to go 3 clicks down to get to it every time. So that's why our file names are short. So Arduino IDE is only good for small projects, not for big things like this. The other thing is use a schedule. Figure out when do you need to do production, when you need parts to come in, and then make sure you track to it. And for me, it's all about learning something new. I wouldn't have done this project unless it was forcing me to learn soldering or learning design, learning drivers, whatever. And even this next year, even though I kind of have a lot of experience in such a short amount of time, I'm still learning something new. And that's really what's motivating me. That's why I spend all my free time doing this. I don't really play video games. My kids, once they go to bed, I'm in the garage coding. I do spend time with my wife. And so that's all I've got. Any questions, or does anybody want to come up and see it?
Question.
Yes.
For your device chart, do you use an abstraction layer or are you going raw and all?
Raw. Well, yes and no. So the driver is highly tuned for, especially on this year's badge, for the Regato or for the NRM52, as well as the display. So it's not going to port very well to other devices. There is an abstraction layer on top of it that will handle, hey, I want to draw a line or draw a circle, or I want to draw this bitmap right to the thing. But even that's still sort of optimized for it. But yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
What was kind of your ramp-up time going from, I know you said it was about a year, but until you really felt comfortable with this stuff, like what was that like? Ooh.
I'd say I didn't feel comfortable until DEF CON. And mostly because, one, I'm risk-averse. So I was showing up with a bunch of my money out of pocket in this project. And we had some play on Twitter, and people were excited about it. But I wasn't really comfortable that I had done something that people would like. I made it something I would like. I wasn't really comfortable until we got mobbed on the 9th floor. If anyone was there, it was crazy. On the 9th floor of Paris, that was probably when I felt comfortable. And even now, still learning new things. I'm not yet. I don't really use the right terms because I don't have years and years and years of background here. But maybe as far as the coding and the hardware, probably around March timeframe. But comfortable with the project was definitely there. And that was so honestly the experience we had at DEF CON, where we couldn't go more than 100 feet without being stopped, where we got mobbed on the 9th floor, where it's just constant. My phone was just constantly vibrating for Twitter notifications. I'm like, do you have badges? Do you have badges? IRC is going crazy. That was a real motivator for doing it this year. As overwhelming as that is as an introvert, I really did enjoy that, and I'm looking forward to something similar next year. So, yeah.
Are you still baking them in the oven?
No. So one of the reasons you'll notice our cost went up. One, PCBs are much more expensive. We are having them fabricated for us. So part of my risk aversion last year was that's way too much money to drop on a project that may completely fail. This year, we're a lot more confident that people are going to want to buy it. We had the Kickstarter that went crazy, so we are paying for a service to do it. That's one of the big drivers in our cost. And just as a data point, the cost per badge has tripled this year for us, and that's after some of our help. It's kind of the project we wanted to do last year but couldn't because we had to restart. Yes?
Any chance we could ever see a Hypno-Toad badge?
Actually, yes, you can, because there's one right here. It's not my creation. This is Glenster, and was it Charles the Hat?
Yeah.
It's really cool. You should come check it out. We've thought about making like different Futurama characters. And anytime you have
ones without a CPU?
What's that?
Fry one be without a CPU?
Yes. Or an AT Tiny 85, right? Yeah. Anytime if you've done this before, you'll have a creation acquire, but anytime you change the PCB design at all, you get tooling costs, and your costs just go up exponentially. So you try to make sure the design is identical across everything. Even switching colors is a real pain. This next year we'll probably just do one color. You may see some others like that red one or a blue one, which is the PCBs I have at home now waiting for me. But we'll probably just do one color to keep the cost down. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.